here at Spherical with good friend Danika Druttman. We worked together for many, many years at the Roger Smith Hotel, where Danika was overseeing all the arts and cultural programming for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Close to it.
10 years.
Long time.
Yes.
So we worked together there, and under the vision of James Knowles, my uncle, who was a painter and a sculptor, and had a very unconventional view of a hotel as a space that's not just rooms and empty rooms, but really a space that's a cultural platform and a place of connection, and an opportunity to challenge people to think differently. And I think we've both been inspired by that and that place to say, hey, what is the nature of a hotel as a platform for not just rooms, but also cultural experiences, and also can cultural experiences drive better rooms performance and hotel brands, and what brands are standing out and why, and oftentimes that's through cultural relevance and storytelling and having a platform for storytelling and all that. So I've since my days there been deep in the industry in a lot of different areas, and excited to see what you do in the industry in various areas with Mira Muse that you're now running. And so to just kind of explore some of those things, of the elements of cultural programming and creative programming. And so tell us a little bit first about your work with Roger Smith, and then things that sort of broader that you've learned about where you're personally passionate about arts and cultural programming related to hotels.
Mm-hmm. So I started at the Roger Smith Hotel in their gallery, which was the lab for performance and installation art. It was a space on the corner where you could see the work from the outside, but you couldn't go in.
Right.
So it was a really unusual format.
Right.
I was there for about 3 years before they closed the gallery, and I moved in sort of operations, as it was, into the hotel. Yep. And from there, I sort of rethought what cultural programming is and can be.
Right.
And from there, sort of step by step, just sort of redeveloped their programming into something that was very dynamic. So we sort of had a lot of programming that was music based, obviously visual arts based, which is where we're really, the program is sort of born from. A lot of talks, a lot of dinners, a lot of spoken words, storytelling. So just really kept it very dynamic. And then obviously the second part of your question was sort of what about that sort of did I find particularly interesting, and how it's led me to Mira Muse, is that they've had a program for 30 years. I did not invent it. Right. And their mission was always very grassroots. It really was never about making money or being the brand. Right. It was very much about being part of a community and supporting artists and bringing interesting people and work to the neighborhood. And I always really loved that, and I always thought that was really inspiring. And obviously there are many different ways of approaching it. It doesn't have to be so grassroots, but that was very much the beginning for me.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting. I've been sort of thinking about this concept of how hotels are this kind of point of convergence of a lot of different things, and that those who are in the industry know all the complexities of them, or still parts of those complexities of being a real estate business and all the financial elements of that, and being a hospitality business and all the elements of that, and food and beverage and design and creative and branding and marketing and digital and all these different elements and how they fit together, and that hotels also, from like a cultural and a neighborhood perspective, are this point of convergence of people coming in, and you experience all these different things, food and drink and arts, and so I think that in a world where there's tons of consolidation, last week the already very consolidated Two Roads was bought by Hyatt, and there's a few big players. For me, that's opened up this kind of world of, okay, well, there's commoditization that happens in the industry, and that's fine, and that opens up opportunity for those that want to do things different and in interesting ways, and make people think and connect and all of that. And so I think it's super cool that that you've been able to do that, and Roger Smith has been able to do that in a multitude of ways, and that also leads to a bigger picture element of, from a sales and marketing perspective, around brand identity and brand awareness, and what's happening in that place in an Instagram era, word of mouth that happens online, and how do you hear about some place that's different? Okay, there's there's hotels that have rooms, and you can look at price and location, but people who want something different, what makes them stand out? And I think that a lot of hotels will hire branding agencies and they'll hire marketing agencies and they'll do sales and all this stuff, but how do you stand out? And so I think you've done a lot of interesting things there that has a lot to offer to the industry, and I think people are looking for that. And so, elements of that, and I guess the Lab Gallery is a piece of that, right? Which is this corner of 47th and Lexington, people walking by that captures people's attention in interesting and unexpected ways, and from a press perspective and things like that. But and then also you had this tight-knit community of people that would come to events, and, but from the kind of exposure perspective of what you're able to do, and then the brand building opportunities, to explore that a little bit. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that ultimately what you're talking about is emotional connection.
Right.
And there's a question of how you find that emotional connection with one single person, with a group of people, online, offline. There's so many strands to it. I think that it comes down to nurture, and how do you nurture people's minds, spirit, soul, physically, mentally, there are all these different ways of doing it, and I think that the arts and culture, I think it's the most effective and efficient tool of doing that. I think it's also the most authentic. I hate that word, but it's
it's such an overused it's an overused word, but it's also that people that are actually being authentic is that Roger Smith couldn't be more couldn't be more appropriate for the realities of that it's not some fabricated thing, that it's this raw human connection that's unconventional, and for that very interesting and very unique, and I think that there's a spectrum of places in the industry. There's big, and then we're working with in a variety of ways, and big scale operators and small lifestyle brands and small independent hotels, and the whole spectrum. But I think that there's applications for the going beyond just establishing a brand identity and having that be a static thing. There's something dynamic about what you're talking about, both in terms of revolving arts programming, but also events and things like that. And I think often, hotels that spend a lot of money on big renovation and big brand identity from really a design perspective, and say, okay, here's this static physical thing, that what your proposition is making that much more dynamic and interesting and compelling, and I think there's a big space for that, and even when you talk about things like members clubs and things like that have programming and events and reasons to bring people together, that how can a hotel be a platform for that? And it's actually remarkable how few have done that in interesting ways.
I mean, to that point, I think that and you'll see it, we all see it, on Instagram, and you'll see a hotel open, and they have the most magnificent photographs of this room and that room and this public space and this drink and that meal and so on. And then it comes to a point where you're like, oh, have I seen that picture before? Or something like that. It's sort of this clutching at straws, because there's not enough content. Whereas with programming, you're able to, you can use it as content. And again, you're touching on, so many different elements of, the sort of intellectual, the spiritual, it's so much easier to connect to people that way. And it's fresh all the time, again, efficient.
Right. No, but we've had countless projects where, we're a couple of years past opening or renovation, that there was a freshness by putting 10, 50, 100, 200 million dollars into a place, and that's great. And we're super, working with, fortunate to work with places that are doing that.
Yeah.
But then it's like, okay, well, there's a stylistic thing that happens when you're talking about just the physical nature of a place. Yeah. But what about the personality and the character and the story and keeping things interesting? And I think that there's a dynamic human element that arts bring to the table, and arts and creative programming and cultural programming and all of it. That there's just a ton of opportunity, and I don't think that hotels need to commit to being an arts-driven hotel to do that. I don't think that they need to, be, the standard or whatever it is in terms of really saying, okay, we're going to do crazy amount of content creation and things like that. But the idea of doing things that are worthy of being talked about and collaborate with different people in different ways, in terms of partnerships and things like that. So I think it's ripe for opportunity, and I actually think that, it hasn't hit the scale of, the amount of new lifestyle hotels and the amount of design and thoughtfulness around all of that. I don't think that, even food and beverage and public space and open lobby spaces and all these things that, have happened, that I think there's a big opportunity to do more at scale that's not like this full-on play, but exploring that. So no one better in the business to do that than Danika. So tons of experience, and where can all of our friends find you?
They can find me at miramuse.com, mira-muse.com.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll link to it. Danika Druttman, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.